Okay, first, I'd like to introduce the panelists. We have the Honorable Judge Grant. Judge Grant was appointed with the Appellate Division, and he served as presiding judge over the Family Division in Essex County, and he is a true champion for bail reform. We have also Lieutenant Lopez from the Newark Police Department, and he keeps daily stats on crime rate in Newark. He monitors arrests, and 22nd year with the department. So thank you for being serving 22 years. That's good. And then we have Mr. Anthony Higgins. Was born and raised in Newark. He is a graduate of Science High School. He went on to receive a Bachelor's of Arts and JD degrees from Rutgers campus of Newark, New Jersey. He has been admitted to practice law in multiple state and federal jurisdictions, as well as member of the Bar of the United States Supreme Court. He has tried cases in both state and federal courts and handled appeals from those courts. Mr. Higgins has previously been a partner, a senior trial attorney, as well as the general counsel for the largest community development organization in the United States. For nearly 20 years, he has written a portion of the New Jersey bar exam. Mr. Higgins was appointed to the Newark Municipal Court in 2008 and spent nearly 4 years dispensing justice. Mr. Higgins is currently the Essex County Prosecutor's Office supervising prosecutor for Central Judicial Processing Court, the prosecutor's detention team, and the special remand court. Mr. Higgins is an integral member of the prosecutor's office in its implementation of criminal justice reform. Now, I'm going to go right into the questions. Each panelist will have the maximum of 3 minutes to answer the questions. And my first question goes to, actually before I start, I'd like to say bail reform is a controversial topic with lots of misinformation and confusion. Tonight we will find out how does it really work, what are the pros, the cons, how is it implemented in Essex County, how does it affect Newark, the West Ward in particular, and is there a need for a change, and we'll find out much more. Now, the first question, Judge Grant. Could you provide us with some background information about why bail reform was necessary and how it works in New Jersey?
I'm going to read you a statement. I want to ask you to tell me when you think this statement was made. What has been demonstrated here is that usually one factor determines whether a defendant stays in jail before he goes to trial. The factor is not guilt or innocent. It's not the nature of the crime. It's not the character of the defendant. The factor is simply money. How much money does the defendant have? That statement was delivered in 1964 by then Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. We have known for decades that a system that relies upon access to money is fundamentally unfair. And for those of you who happen to look like me, it disproportionately affects people of color. That really is the fundamental reason why there has been a challenge, a change in New Jersey to try to create a more fairer, a less economic-based system of pretrial release. But even on the other side, there was this gentleman by the name of Durst. He was a millionaire. And he said, put a $1 million bail on me, Judge. He paid the $1 million, and what did he do? He murdered the person. So what we see on both sides of the issue is that access to money can create a very unfair criminal justice system. Fast forward about 10 years ago, in this ward, on a playground, there were 5 students. 4 of them were murdered. Young lady was irreparably harmed. You know, 2 of those defendants were out on what? Monetary bail. So we know that the bail system has a dual system problem. Those people who are poor can't get out, and those people who have access to money can get out. And so that's what people try to call it bail reform, but really is criminal justice reform. Because what we're talking about is a criminal justice system. It's not just about what the courts do, it's what the police officers do, it's what the prosecutors do, it's what the public defenders do, it's what the correction does. Everybody is involved in the criminal justice system. And so what this plan is attempting to do is to try to provide better community safety on one end, because for the first time in New Jersey's history, we have the ability to pre-trial detain somebody. That is, the system can say, on motion of the prosecutor, this particular individual is a risk to our community and therefore needs to be detained pre-trial, and other people who are not a risk to our community should be released. So that puts the context for criminal justice reform.
Oh, thank you, Judge. Mr. Higgins, my next question is for you. How is bail reform implemented differently in Essex County than other counties?
What everyone has to understand is once this came, and we're talking about criminal justice reform, it was an incredible change in the way our laws were handled. In Essex County today, what we have is a system of monitoring by the prosecutor's office. It's known as screening. No other county in this state is requiring the police to reach out to the prosecutor's office when someone's going to be charged with a crime. It does not matter what the crime is. Every officer who decides that they want to put handcuffs on someone and charge that person with a crime needs to call my office. The difference in that is amazing. What does that mean? That means in 2016, an officer could have had an interaction with a citizen and decided that they're going to charge that citizen with a various number of crimes. That officer would arrest that citizen, take that citizen to the police station, and then charge them. That case would then be forwarded to our office for review. That doesn't happen anymore. What happens now is that officer makes a decision that he's going to arrest that individual. He takes him to the police station. He will then have a conversation with an attorney from my office, an assistant prosecutor, who's going to start asking a lot of questions. What's your basis for probable cause? What evidence do you have? What did he do? What do you want to charge him with? What very few people talk about is the number of times that my office declines all or some of the charges that a police officer thinks they want to put on the individual. That is the amazing change that's happened in this county, and only in this county. I'll say it again. Every time.
So I can't let him keep saying that. Right. For decades, Somerset County prosecutor had prosecutorial screening, well before criminal justice reform. Probably 9 out of the 21 counties have prosecutorial review. What is new is Essex County, for the first time, has prosecutorial review. Never had it before.
Judge, if I can interrupt you like you interrupted me. Those counties don't do it 24 hours a day. We do it 24 hours
Somerset does.
We do it 24 hours a day. That means 5:45, the officer put handcuffs on someone, they need to talk to our office.
Right.
And get those charges.
So that goes back to Councilman McCullough's question about if the prosecutor is reviewing every case, it is impossible for a defendant to get out in a matter of hours. Right? He's reviewing every case.
When you say every case, Judge, I think you're
every charge, every defendant that's charged.
I think you're confusing crime and offenses. Offenses are not necessarily criminal justice reform eligible, as you know.
Right.
So when an officer is charging someone with an offense and putting that person on a summons, they're not reaching out to us.
Right.
Criminal justice, if I could.
That's correct, but that was never the case. We never reviewed summonses, nor did anybody else. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Judge.
And this is a great, healthy debate, but just for time purposes, I would like us to just keep it going. And if you have a rebuttal, we can wait till after the members are finished talking. Now, my next question is to Lieutenant Lopez. How does prosecutorial review at times of arrest affect NPD's operations, and how do you see bail reform? How do you see bail reform impacting crime in Newark?
Well, let me start off by saying that the Newark Police Division wholeheartedly supports bail reform, and I know that Director Ambrose, the Public Safety Director, the Mayor, I know they all stand behind it. It was a little rough at the beginning, but I think the officers also see the positives of it. As far as how it affects the police division on an operational level. So prior to bail reform, we would arrest someone, we would determine the charges, we would either determine, whether the charges would be something that they would either be released or they would have to go before a prosecutor to go to the county. Well, that was a relatively easy process that we controlled, that we were able to do. Now it has to go before a prosecutor. A prosecutor has to review it. Then after the prosecutor may deem that the charges are applicable or not applicable, or authorized or may not be authorized, it gets sent back to the officer. Then the officer has to take it, make changes, send it back to the prosecutor. It goes back to the officer. Then the officer has to send it to the judge for approval. So it's not as fast a process as it used to be before. So now what happens is that the arrest process now is taking longer. And what does that do? That is keeping the officers in the arrest room longer. So instead of being able to come in, get the charges, write up the reports, get the officer back out of the street, now these officers are taking maybe anywhere from 60 to 70% longer than they used to before. So an arrest that maybe before for a minor offense might have taken 45 minutes to an hour is now taking 2.5 to 3 hours. So where is that officer in the meanwhile? That officer is not patrolling your neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? He's not on the corner where that shooting just happened. You know what I'm saying? He's not looking for that burglar that just, did 3 houses. He's in the precinct having to take care of that because of this whole new process. So that's how, that's how I see it as how it's affecting and has the most impact. Is that the longer that they're taking in this process, the less time they have to be on the street to answer your calls and to protect your neighborhood.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Wow, okay, I'd like to welcome Mayor Baraka. All right, my next question is going to be for Mr. Higgins. Can you provide some background on why the trial process was expedited through criminal justice reform, and what does the timeline for the trial process look like today?
When criminal justice reform was coming through New Jersey, one of the things we have to keep in mind is that there was a compromise made. And part of the compromise, and I know Mr. Johnson is aware of it, he was there, is the Essex delegation was concerned about this concept of holding someone without bail until a trial was heard. And that compromise resulted in the allowance of pretrial detention with the balance of speedy trial. So if someone's charged with an indictable offense and we're successful in having that person detained pre-trial, my office has 90 days to bring that person to indictment. And after they're indicted, we're to take that case to trial within 180 days. There are some times when we have what's known as excludable time, but those are the real time guidelines that is expected that we're to follow. That once a person is charged, 90 days to get them through grand jury to indictment, 180 days after indictment to get them to a trial.
All right, right now I'd like to introduce the Honorable Mayor Roz Baraka. Would you like to say a few words?
Well, I'm sorry for being late, a little sick, but I forced myself to come. I don't know what was talked about yet in terms of introductory stuff. Oh, okay. So, one, I just want to say I'm a proponent of bail reform first, before anything else. I believe that there are people who are in jail, probably that don't need to be because of their bail is too high. And I think that the effort to fix that is the right thing to do, not just in New Jersey, but around the country. There's some issues that we have in Newark, obviously, and probably around Essex County, talking to other mayors, and I know the judge is aware, the delegation, I heard you speaking about it, and we've talked to them on several occasions, and I know there's been efforts to try to fix the things that are, we think are flaws and make it more perfect in our mind. And, everything that comes out the door the first time is not perfect. There's probably things that you have to do to make it better. I think this is an opportunity for us to get it right, because we don't want the reverse of that, of people who are committing very dangerous levels of crimes and other things to have a revolving door to be able to get out of jail when we know we need to scrutinize them a little more. So I think those are the kind of issues that we need to be aware of. And some of the property crime stuff as well has been an issue for us here in Newark that we just have to address. And hopefully this is an opportunity to get that done.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And one question for you. You might have to repeat yourself, but how do you see bail reform impacting Newarkers? And what are some of the positives of bail reform?
Well, I think, Bill, the positive part of it is that there obviously, before that, more than dozens of people in jail who are simply there because they can't afford bail for very simple charges, things that, they're in jail because of their socioeconomic status and more than likely their race, because they live in these specific areas. If they had bail, were able to afford bail, they'd be out. I mean, if they could use the money that it would cost them to pay bail to feed their families or other kind of things, they may not be involved in the issues that they're involved in, or maybe be able to seek some type of services or help. So, I mean, the diminishing of those people being in jail is a good thing. I just don't think that you can measure the success of bail reform by how many people are not in jail, right? Because I think you measure it by who's in jail or who's incarcerated as opposed to how many people. Those are the kind of issues that we have, and it impacted us in the county and in the city of Newark because, we have what was known as prosecutorial screening in our precincts, where they would have the ability to downgrade charges on arrest. It has been affecting us because they've been putting a lot of people who probably should have been detained for a little longer out on the streets at a very short period of time to engage in a crime again, or somebody perpetrate a crime against them, which keeps the cycle of violence and other things happening in the city. I mean, there's obviously issues of property crime that continues to go up too. I mean, I think that there's a whole piece of social services that should be also attached to all of this stuff. So if there's a person that's a repeat offender that keeps getting arrested for property crime, busting people's windows, taking stuff out of their car, snatching pocketbooks, things of that nature, that there has to be some kind of social service attached to that. We can't just keep, saying we're doing something good, we letting them out of jail. That's right, but we also have to provide them with a pipeline so they're not going back into the same incarceration as they did. Because, when you look at it, there are people who are getting arrested 6, 7, 8 times that are committing crimes in multiple cities that are being arrested and detained and are being let back out. So I know that the people of the city are frustrated about that, and also lowers cops' morale when they arrest people. And, the next day they see the guy on the same street in the same day doing the same thing, that they have to arrest him again. So it lowers the morale of the officers here. So, I mean, there's things that we have to do to get this thing right. And there's enough of us. I mean, our collective IQ is better than our individual IQ.
That's true. Now, this question is for all the panelists. What refinements need to be made to bail or criminal justice reform in order for it to be more effective? And this is for all panelists, so you can start, Judge, and then you go down.
One of the hidden things that people don't talk about in criminal justice reform is the fact that under the old system, prosecutors would file what is called a bail source hearing. That is, where did the defendant get his money to get out of jail? And the county that led the state in filing those bail source applications? I'm talking about 300% greater than any other county. It was only like 4 counties that used the bail source. Essex County filed hundreds of those. And so today, ending December 31st, there are 1,347 defendants sitting in jail that the prosecutor didn't have to file a bail source hearing on. Those individuals are being pretrial detained until their trial is resolved. That is a benefit because those individuals under the old system had the opportunity to get out and to commit offenses. So while we focus sometimes on who's getting out, there is also a very strong correlation. I said this to the public safety director. There's a strong correlation as to why some of your crimes are going down, because the people are being held for a significant period of time now under the public safety aspects of that. All right, so you don't have this situation where the guy can have $1 million, he can get out no matter how much money. If the prosecutor is able to sustain his or her case, that person is in jail for however long that trial is necessary. And if you look at it, Essex County with 20% of that population, all right, there were 8,000 people detained, and 20% of them are from Essex County. That's a positive development. Talk about criminal safety. The other thing that I would say about criminal justice is, police do it, Mayor, I love him, but he also does it because he hears from his public safety director, is focus on crime as opposed to what happens to the dispositions. Cops are out there doing their jobs every single day and arresting people. If they're arresting people 6 or 7 times, the first obvious question is, what's the conviction rate? Why is Glenn Grant getting arrested in 2016 and still out on the seat? Because the law says, if you're convicted twice for robbery, for example, you have what is called a no early release act. You must do 85% of your crime. All right, and so, and I told this to the public safety director before, your conversation can't just be about arrest activity. It has to be about conviction. Because it's illogical to say, wait a minute, I arrested this person for, if you're outside of a school zone selling marijuana or drugs, the statute says second offense, mandatory jail time. There are a lot of significant things associated with prosecutorial convictions. And so we have allowed the conversation to only focus in on arrest and still not saying what happened to that defendant. Did the police go to trial? Were they able to sustain their burden of proof? Were the prosecutors able to sustain their burden of proof with respect to that trial? But we only have this tendency to focus in on arrest, losing sight of the fact that it's a criminal justice system. Police have a role, prosecutors have a role, judges have a role if they convict that person by sending that person to jail. And that's the important thing about a continuum in that collaborative relationship. The mayor correctly points out that any crime strategy fails if it's only about law enforcement. It's about, well, like the mayor does in the summer, do great summer activities for kids, try to get them off the street, give them employment, try to give people employment, try to give drug treatment, mental health treatment. It is an entire spectrum of things that you need in order to be successful with a crime-facing strategy. No one thing is going to make the community safe, and candidly, at the end of the day, it involves all of you. Because if we can't get you guys to become invested in the safety of your neighborhoods, then it's going to fail.
Thank you, Judge. Mayor?
Excellent.
Well, I think, well, first I just want to agree with the judge. And part of it, we do focus on the rest, but we also focus on the prosecutor's office heavily because sometimes the downgrading of a lot of these charges before they even get to the judge becomes a problem for us. And in this new iteration of what's happening now, prosecutor's office is downgrading charges now before they even get to trial. Like at the point of arrest, they're downgrading charges. So you might be arrested for something else, and they downgrade it to something else before you even get to the trial. So we believe that is a problem here in the city of Newark, and I believe that we had an option to pick that. The prosecutor had an option to either go with that or not. That's one thing. And secondly, I think you're right. There's two things that happens in our community. There's either one, over-policing, or two, no policing. And I think that that's we get one extreme or the other in our community. I think sometimes when they look at, black and brown communities, people, they think that we're just upset because of police presence. Sometimes, in most meetings I go to, people are upset because there are no police presence, right? So they don't believe the police are doing anything. And so there's what the closeout rate is, for example, in some cities like Baltimore and other places around the country. When you see high crime, you see low closeout rates, right? And then when you go to court, you see them treating these people with, just like they don't care, just allowing them to leave and all this other kind of stuff because they don't think that there's a way to fix this. And I think that's a problem. And so we face that here in the city, and we have to deal with it on both sides. We have to make sure we have enough, kind of input and aggressiveness around ending the kind of crime and criminal careers of individuals, and two, not being so heavy-handed, at the same time. And I'm agree, lastly, that, social services, and we've tried to do that in Newark with the Street Academy, Newark Community Street Team, with police department hiring social workers, all these kinds of things to help us mitigate some of these issues, because we know, like the judge said, you can't arrest a person 6 or 7 times. Obviously, they have a problem. Right, and we have to do something about that problem, or you're going to continue to keep doing that.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Higgins?
I think I want to deal with the issue that Judge Grant raised about people who are being repeatedly arrested. one of the things we want to keep in mind is that when someone's arrested and they're charged, the officer's making a decision as to what to charge them. They're talking to my office and deciding what to charge them. There are individuals who come back, and no one's talked about the public safety assessment, and I don't think there needs to be a large discussion about that right now. But there are individuals that are coming through, and we make the determination that this individual needs to be taken off the street. When we make that determination, that's only going to hold that individual 72 hours. That's it. That individual is then in front of a superior court judge, and we make our arguments to that superior court judge. The difficulty we have, and I'm going to be very honest with you, when you have low-level offenders who are repeatedly committing the same offense, we have a difficulty in getting these judges to understand these defendants need to be kept in. The judge is looking at us and said, well, he broke into 2 cars, he broke into 3 cars. He's been doing this for 6 months, Judge. We can't have this individual out. The individual is released, they go back and they reoffend, and they reoffend, and we're reapplying to have that person detained. Any individual case is not fair to look at, but collectively, those are some of the things that we're fighting about. The downgrade charges the mayor is talking about. I understand the mayor's frustration. First of all, I live here. And when I say I live here in the West Ward. I understand my car's been broken into. At the same time, and I hate to throw numbers, but here's one that I want you to think about. 2016, we go to the grand jury thousands of times. And over 600 times, the grand jury told us, you know, that cop, that argument you made, we're not buying it. We're not going to indict the individual. That's 2016. Over 600 times, the grand jury said, no. 2017, with screening, with us saying, wait a second, we need to put a case together that we can make. Not charge everything that's possible to be charged, which you know happens sometimes, let's be honest. Sometimes they're throwing everything they could think of at an individual. And we're going to say, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's look at what can be made. Officer, tell me what evidence you have, what witnesses do we have, what can we make? 2017, that thumbs down, almost 50% less. Let's listen to this. 50% less the grand jury said, we don't buy the officer, we don't buy your argument, prosecutor. Because we're screening these cases, we're looking at these cases. And before we move on, one of the things I want people to understand about criminal justice reform, I agree with everyone. There's going to be tension between me and the judge. There's tension between me and we love each other, but trust me, there's tension when we're screening. And I understand the tension with the prosecutor's office, with the mayor's office. But I like criminal justice reform. I'm going to explain to you why. When I get a case in CJP, that means the person's been arrested by the officer decided to charge him with a crime, he's going to be seen by my office in CJP. And I have to determine whether or not to detain that person. The information I get regarding that person is essentially scrubbed of where they live, what they look like, their race. When they talk about the public safety assessment, what they won't tell you is it's colorblind. They won't tell you that it doesn't care whether or not you're employed or unemployed. They don't explain to you, they don't care what you make, where you live. It is simply a determination done. How many times have you been convicted of a crime? How many times have you been sentenced to jail for 14 days or more? Have you been sentenced to a violent crime? Are you currently pending charges? And what are your charges are now? It does take into consideration, we have to be honest, if you're 20 years or younger, that's going to be a ding on you. Then the PSA is going to tell me how many times you missed court. And they verify this. So if you were in jail for a crime and you missed court, they don't hit you for that. But if you don't come to court, we look at that. You have pending charges, you've been convicted before, and you have new charges, you don't look good. But all that's done without consideration to race. It's amazing when you think that that's what's going on. When I look at the cases I have to review what my APs do, I don't get a picture of the defendant. And as somebody from Newark, it's amazing when the decision is made to detain somebody and I have a Caucasian attorney going, what are you talking about? They're from Caldwell. What are you doing?
Who cares?
I'm treating them as equally as I would treat this man, this man, this man, you, and you. I look at what they've done, what they've been convicted of. Do they go to jail before? Do they not show up to court? I don't care about their race. But it's amazing to me the change in the lawyers and their response to it by our decisions that are race neutral.
Lieutenant?
Thank you. You've heard a couple of different things, and again, everything's been on point, but there's something that keeps on getting thrown around, and I have to touch on it just so everybody is a little bit more educated. And when Mr. Higgins touched on, he kept on saying, you kept on hearing these three initials, PSA. It's a public safety assessment. And what is that? That is basically, it's an app, like on your phone. It's an algorithm that was developed, and it takes into consideration a person's background, their criminal case history, all these things that Mr. Higgins says. And then what happens is, it goes into this app, right? It takes it, and it analyzes it, and it spits out a score. And the score is between 1 and 6. 1 being the lowest, 6 being the highest. So, I have a relatively minor criminal history. Nothing bad.
You personally.
Me personally. I have nothing bad. So what happens is, it goes into the algorithm, it spits out a 1 and a 1. I'm going to be home before the officers finish the paperwork.
Not true.
I'm going to be home before the officers finish the paperwork because it's a 1 and a 1. It's going to go on a summons. I'm going to get siloed.
Yeah, but summons, yeah. Summons.
Correct. So now, let's just say that now I had a 4 and a 4, and now I'm going to go, and I have to go to the county because everything's been deemed that way. Okay? So now I'm a criminal burglar. I went to the county. Contrary to Mr. Higgins, I was released in 48 hours, not 72 hours. I might even be released before that if the county's really got their act together and they're really cranking it along. So now what happened? I have a 10-bag-a-day habit. Okay? Before I would go to jail, I would stay there for a little while. Granted, yes, you're right. I might have not been able to afford that bail. But now I'm out within 48 hours. Guess what's the first thing I'm going to look for when I get out of jail? Man, I got to go feed that habit. And you know what? I'm going to break into your car. I'm going to break into your house. I'm going to break into your car. And I'll tell you what, I've had my car broken into. I've had my house burglarized. And I tell you what, short of being the victim of a violent crime, that's probably like the next worst thing that can happen to you. You feel violated. You feel like people have rummaged through your personal belongings, you know. And that person, you know, had their rent taken. They had their cell phone taken. Now they can't pay their rent. Now they're out. So it's a trickle effect, you know, with everything that's going on. So prior to bail reform, okay, the judge had to look at the entire process. So they literally had the person's criminal case history in front of them. And they're like, oh man, this guy has 36 arrests, 17 felony convictions. 10 of them were for burglary. 4 of them were for CDS. Yes, they said, all right, you know, we're going to set a $5,000 bail. Now, no. And let's call it like it is. The judges are too reliant on the PSA scores right now. So they receive the information. This PSA spits out a score. It says a 2 and a 3. The judge says, oh, a 2 and a 3, put it on a summons, and that's it. Or the person's they're going to get released. That never happened prior. That never happened prior to bail reform. The judge had to look at it. The judge had to make a decision what was going to happen with this person. We're too reliant on PSA scores to make a determination what's happening with these individuals. Another thing that we've touched on it. Okay, these individuals, they're being released. There's no social services for these individuals. So You know, before, yeah, they might have been in jail for 2 or 3 weeks, but you know what happened during those 2 or 3 weeks? They had an opportunity to sober up a little bit. And maybe they had an opportunity to see the light and say, you know what? I don't want to get high no more. You know what? I want to go on a different route. Now, they're getting released, like I said, within 48 hours, or they're getting released right from the police station. They're hot to go, man. They're ready to go to the next job and break into the next car and, you know, mug the next person. Okay? But they're getting released, and they're like, here you go. Here's your next court date. I'll see you in 6 days. How about we say, hey, listen, here's the list of places you can go to. Here's La Casa de Don Pedro. Here's Unity House. Here's a place where you can go and get your resume made. Here's a place where you can go and apply for a job. You know? No, they're just letting them out. See you in 5 days. And they have nowhere to go. They have nothing to rely on. You know what I'm saying? To try to get out of this circle, out of this, you know, this rat chase that they're in.
And Lieutenant, can you describe at the beginning when you were talking about the rhythm 101? Can you go in more details for those that don't understand the 101?
I'll just try to be.
Because I do it every day with people.
Go ahead.
When you talk about the public safety assessment, the public safety assessment has essentially 3 parts. There are 2 public safety assessments. Lieutenant's really focusing on the initial one. This is the one that municipal court judges will review and determine whether or not a person will be placed on a summons or a warrant. It's correct. If you're placed on a summons under criminal justice reform, you're going to be released from the police station unless you have other holds. If you're placed on a warrant under criminal justice reform, you're going to be sent to the county correctional facility, the Green Munster. The 72 hours happens if my office moves for detention. The law requires that your detention hearing is held within 72 hours of that decision, and then the Superior Court judge will decide whether or not you get out. To focus on the initial PSA that the lieutenant is talking about, the first number is regarding whether or not you have a high propensity to reoffend. If you're a 1, the public safety assessment says you have a very low propensity to reoffend. If you're a 6, the public safety assessment says you have a very high propensity to reoffend. The second number, how likely you are to come back to court. You're a 1, the likelihood is you're coming back. You're a 6, we're not seeing you until we catch you. There's also an indicator. It's called the NCVA, New Criminal Violence Activity Flag. If you have what's known as a red flag, that tells everybody, if you were to commit a new offense, the likelihood that offense is going to be violent. So municipal court judges, when the officer has arrested somebody and charged them, are then called after my office has said, hey, these are the charges that things should go forward. They get what the lieutenant's talking about, the computer-generated PSA, and they look at that, and they have guidelines. Judge Grant tells them exactly what to do. In fact, Judge Grant makes sure they don't hear the case unless their PSA is in the case checker. Am I correct, Judge Grant?
Correct.
Thank you. They look at that, and then they have to make a determination as to whether that person goes on a summons or a warrant. The PSA makes a recommendation, but the judge is the judge and always makes a determination. So there are times I am more than appalled when I see individuals who have committed serious offenses, but the judge, despite the police officer's request and my officer's request, has placed that person on a summons. I've seen people with gun charges on summonses, people on shootings at somebody placed on a summons.
Judge is not involved in involved in those.
I'm sorry, Judge. When the request, I don't interrupt you, Judge.
I'm sorry, but when you misrepresent
I'm not misrepresenting.
counsel, the public safety assessment says if you have a Graves Act offense, any weapons offense, you commit more than 2 thefts, the recommendation is going to be what?
To be held.
No release
Warrant.
recommended.
May I ask
and
it?
warrant.
Well,
So
Judge,
when you're saying a summons, though.
Judge, you're confusing the 2 PSAs. I'm sorry. We're talking about the preliminary PSA. Issues not released.
But therefore the judge is
It's
not, that's the prosecutor's call then. If you're going on a
No,
summons.
Judge, let's be honest. We have judges here where we have asked for warrants and they have not had warrants issued. We have judges here. An officer was shot and the judge would not allow the case to go forward against the co-defendant. We have to be honest.
When?
The mayor, do you know about that, Mayor? Would
When?
you like to inform Judge Grant about that, Mayor? So that we can understand that while we're trying to have a community forum here,
I'd like to take a moment and just remind
Transparency matters.
that we cannot interrupt, and please, this is good, healthy debate, but we can't talk
This is
over
excellent.
each
We
other.
need to know this. We need to know. We
From Newark, we argue.
want the rebuttals. We like the interactive rebuttals.
The point that I'm making to you, the Supreme Court in May said anybody arrested with a weapons offense, all Graves Act offenses, will get a recommendation of no release. So tell me when it happened.
Judge, would you like to,
Mr. Ball,
Mayor,
hold on
would you
one
like
second.
to tell?
Mr. Ball, you want to say what happened?
I just want to say Director Ambrose gave the court the top 10, 15 burglary cases, the top 10, 15 violent crime cases, and we did a full evaluation on all of those cases. And I think it's a little disingenuous to put everything on the judges here, because more often than not, the judge wouldn't even see that case. If it's on a summons, it can stop right at the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor can say, no, don't want a warrant, it's on a summons, and it goes back. It does happen where it can go up to the judge, but our numbers from that review on Director Ambrose's numbers showed that I think it was about 80% of them that were on a summons started on a summons, which means the judge had nothing to do with it. So I think there is both, but if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about the real numbers.
The point is, it's happening, though. And,
We have to be honest.
That's right. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is
We're
doing.
not saying this is something that happens every day, but we don't have to make it seem like we're always letting people out.
Right, so let me just say that what he's saying did happen. The person was, with the co-defendant. But
The judge failed to find probable cause, correct?
Yes, but the reverse, sometimes the reverse is true too. So you have people who haven't been arrested maybe for 10, 15 years, and they catch them with a weapon or something else, and they hold them. They give them a warrant there in the county, and they hold them. And then you're confused because then there are people who have been just caught with a gun and was involved in a shooting. And so what happens if you catch a guy, he's involved in a shooting, he is allowed to be released. He's either going to finish the job or somebody's going to shoot him. Right. So that's when you get these high levels of shootings, because when the guys come out, you can't just shoot at people like you said. This is Newark. Right? You're just going to allow you to shoot at them. So at the end of the day, those things happen, and it creates this kind of problem. And so I think that needs to be dealt with, no matter where it's happening at. It needs to be dealt with. But I think that the piece that we're missing is that, and it was touched on slightly, was when are we going to insert some social service into this? Like, at what juncture are we going to use some of the money that's being saved?
Go ahead.
Because there's money being saved here.
Correct.
So the money that's being saved, to begin to use those dollars to create mandatory opportunities for folks to be able to get themselves out of these predicaments. That's extremely important. And even I would say on the state level, in terms of the state legislature, sometimes we give people these kind of sentences that are very, very, very long. And, I would argue that, we need to shorten some of the sentence and use the savings on that to reinvest in reentry and social services, because a person who maxes out and comes back is more likely to return than somebody that's out here on kind of services or monitoring. And it's important for us to do that because we're spending a lot of money giving people, and almost 90% of the people always return back to the city of Newark. If you're 25 years old, you give a guy 20 years, he's coming back home regardless. And he'll be the one that's breaking into the cars, doing a property crime that has the drug habit now. So those things is very cyclical, the stuff that we're talking about. And because we are not, have a hefty plan that deals with kind of making sure you repair people's lives, all we're doing is passing them around and putting a burden on somebody else. Then they become our burden. Ultimately, they're our burden in the city. They become my burden, good, wrong, or indifferent,
To be fair, when they say there's no social service programs, look, I'm a prosecutor, but I've been a defense attorney as well. To be fair, defense attorneys and the PD have the opportunity for defendants who have drug problems to apply the drug. We have an excellent drug court in Essex County. And I think Judge Grant was very helpful in getting that together. But that's something that the defendant and his attorney has to apply for. We have a mental health court that when I interact with that person, amazing things are happening with individuals. And more recently, we have now a veterans program, and we're going to be setting up, and as of today, we know, let me finish, man.
Yeah,
We know that there are individuals who are veterans, and when they're charged, that information is being sent up, and we're trying to set up a program to divert those veterans so they can receive additional services. I'm sorry, Mayor.
Yeah, but the court is different from the actual program itself, right? So we have to stand up actual programs that have some kind of modicum of success that we attach to the courts so people can be adjudicated through those processes. You can't just say we have this and we let them go and say fill out this application, there are 5 places you can go to, right? We have to make it mandatory that they go to these places and fund these places with the dollars that are saved on all of these things so that they exist and they're real, and that you actually put people through these programs as opposed to saying here's a laundry list of programs you can go to. We advise that you fill out an application and go to one of these. Guess ones they're going to? None. We gotta
I wish I could make them go.
Right, but
I wish I could make
the
them
courts have the authority to do that. But it has to. But we have to. Right, we have to exactly. We have to work on that kind of pathway. And I think the prosecutor's office also should be aware of all that stuff in the beginning.
We are.
So I agree with everything everybody says here. I think the challenge is when you change something, people get nostalgic for the past.
Very true.
You know, and the reality is those same individuals who was coming out 2 weeks later was doing the robberies and breaking into cars under the old system. And there was no accountability. Nobody's talking about, as I said, that 20% of the people in this county are in jail without
Just a little later.
Just a little later. Prosecutors were doing those reviews just a little later. I also think that we sometimes have the quest for the perfect to get in the way of the good. So, for example, drug court works. You ever been to a drug court graduation in Essex County, see all of the wonderful people who have reclaimed their lives. We have a program called Intensive Supervised Probation, which takes people out of jail, people from this city, this county, and give them a restart in life. So we have a lot of good programs. Would we like to do more? Would we obviously like to have more people reclaim themselves? Absolutely. But there is a lot of good work. So I don't want to take anything away from the great work that the police department is doing, the prosecutors is doing. You know, there is great work going on in this community. Like everybody else, we just want a little more. Like everybody else, we want it to be perfect. But I think the reality is, because you're dealing with human beings, it's impossible to be perfect. So what you will always try to do is engage in a dialogue and a conversation about how can we tweak this. And as I said, in May, the things with weapons came up. The court says, hey, every recommendation, if you're charged with possession of an assault weapon, you're charged with a rifle, a gun, the recommendation in the public safety assessment is what we call NRR, no release recommended. But yeah, we follow up. Because even here's the thing, we capture statistics. You know, when we talk about today's society, everybody counts stuff. You know, you count your money, right? You get upset, somebody take your money. Well, we track what's going on in our system. So we say that the public safety assessment is just a tool. The judges have the final say. So across the state, on pretrial detention application, the percentage is 57.4. In Essex, it's 53. In Cape May, it's 40. In Bergen, it's 54. In Hudson, it's 58. We're not saying that judges are going to always agree with the public safety. What is the prosecutor's proof? What's the defense argument? We want human beings to make those determinations. Right. You know, we're not turning over our society to a computer, if you will. We still say, judges, you have the responsibility to make those decisions. And it is okay for the mayor to say, well, how did that guy with that shooting get out? I disagree with that judge. That's a right thing. You can say that. But then you got to go behind and say, well, what proofs, what evidence did the judge have before him or her? But there's a legitimate concern. But the system overall tries to make it better.
Well, thank you. That was very good. And at this moment, I would like to turn it over to the audience for those who have questions. And I'll just a little note out there, please be respectful to the person that's speaking. And when I call on you, that's when you can stand and ask your questions, and you have 2 minutes. So would anybody like to ask a question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Hi, everyone. As I was sitting here, my name is Jeanette Seabrooks. As I was sitting here, listening to the dialogue amongst the speakers, I got a little confused because if we're working towards changing the system, can you hear me, dear? Oh, because she, okay, I'm sorry. Oh, let me use my teacher's voice. Like they say. Thank you, my dear. As I was sitting here listening, I was getting a little confused because if we're trying to change the system, and I agree, I have agreed thus far with everything that has been said about changing. However, can you talk to the mic now? However, if the judge has, and I'm just pointing towards you, judge has the final say-so about the defendant being released, I apologize, then everybody, you have to talk about it. There has to be talk amongst you before that person is released. I don't understand that. And I like the system where it was before, where you had to check everything before that defendant was released back into the community. I don't understand that. Because yet, Mr. Lopez, Lieutenant Lopez, you said that the police officers now. Because I know I'm talking. Oh, you got it? Okay. You know what? You don't have to do this. However, if we're taking longer in the process of checking, crossing all the I's and crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's before that defendant is released, then let's do that. I don't understand it. And then the prosecutor is saying that he's becoming infuriated because then what he has said goes back to the judge, and the judge says, well, release him. I don't understand. This is confusing to me, and this is why we have this reciprocal, a revolving door situation where if a defendant has committed so many crimes, he or she is released again back into the community. And that's why the crime continues. And you're right. I do believe, just like a child or anyone, if you are doing something over and over again, where's the help? You have to be punished. It had to stop now. So I agree with what the changes are going on now. The bail situation. Folks are being jailed without legitimate cause for a number of times. And then, if you have money, you can buy your way out. And that's how the society is, I understand. But my point is, the judge, it's okay, bringing it in, not the mayor, I'll skip over you, mayor, prosecutor, and the police department. You've got to talk amongst yourselves. This has got to stop. And this is excellent tonight. More people should be here to understand how this process works. And it can be done if we have everybody, like the judge said, participating.
If I could just really quick.
Go ahead,
I can say,
and thank you very much.
because I see it every day. So where the prosecutorial screening is, it actually happens right over here at 480 Clinton Avenue. And that's where I'm assigned to every day. So I see it every day. So I can wholeheartedly say that the police department and the prosecutors have a very good relationship. And we've come to a happy place where we've agreed to disagree.
That's healthy.
No, absolutely. So, you know, would we as the police department, we would like to take on our own charging. We know we're very capable of determining, you know, what goes on a summons and what goes on a warrant. That's been taken away from us. So now what happens is, and I understand that there's certain things that the prosecutor is looking for because they need to make a determination, like Mr. Higgins says, that before they had 600 no bills, prior to 217, and now it's cut in half. Okay, but the officer on the street they only need to meet the probable cause for arrest. It's up to the prosecutor to go ahead and take the ball after we've given it to them and run with it and make that prosecution. So the frustration with us, and this is where we agreed to disagree, the police department will make an arrest for what we deem appropriate. The prosecutor okay, will look at it and they're like, you know what, there's not enough here. The guy doesn't have enough drugs on him. Or
not quite fair, but I know what you're saying.
well, there's a scale, you know, a certain amount,
Well, that's
a
true
certain
now.
amount of drugs will get you, you know, and if it doesn't meet that criteria, because the PSA score is low, then that person will go in a summons and they will get released. That is a fact.
That's insane.
Absolutely, it's insane.
That's ridiculous.
When people say that's insane, one of the comments I'm going to make, and I'm actually going to use something Judge Grant said previously. I wasn't there, but I saw it. And it's a fair comment. If you want perfect safety, everyone who's charged gets locked up, nobody goes home. And I don't think that's the society we want to live in. That because he says you did something, you get handcuffs and you don't get home. I don't think that's what we want. So I don't have a problem with there being detention between the police department and my office. I don't have a problem with there being tension between myself and Judge Grant and the judges that he supervises. I don't have a problem with there being a tension between myself and the mayor and the judges he supervises. I don't have a problem with that. But the reality is we have this balance because I can foresee exactly the picture that Lieutenant Lopez is drawing in your mind until I tell you what he really saying is when your son gets caught with that one joint, he don't care about how much the drugs is. He wants it on a warrant for them to go to the county. I could see that there's got to be balance in this system, and there's got to be some common sense in this system. So there is an idea that there's some people who are going to go, you've committed a crime or you've committed an offense, and you're going to go home on a summons. And there's other individuals for whom we're concerned because pretrial detention, if we're going to be honest and fair about it, is the concept of keeping someone we believe is a danger to you in jail. Someone danger to the community in
Jehovah
jail.
Jireh
Someone who's trying
Baptist
to
Church
obstruct
in the West
process
Newark.
in jail. That's it. The guy who's peeing on the street that does it every other weekend is incredibly annoying and is clearly committing an offense, but I don't think we want that guy necessarily detained until his case is tried. And if I'm wrong, raise your hand, let me know the guy you want detained. I'm just being real about it because we have to, because in one sense, to me, these are the defendants who are committing crimes in the community that I live in. In another sense, these are our citizens, and even though I'm a prosecutor, I don't forget that they have rights and that I have to prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And they need to be treated fairly.
So what we're trying to do, what actually is trying to happen is we're trying to guard against people's historical racism that has affected this system systematically for decades. And the whole idea of bail reform is to make sure people aren't heavy-handed against everybody in the community simply because they have a kind of preconceived notion about these people because they come from a certain
505 South 15th Street.
This kind of algorithm, that kind of thing has been put in place because we don't trust the police officers. This was happening. We don't trust the police officers' ability to be able to make a fair kind of assessment of who's brought into the jail, who's not, how to make station house adjustments, how to do these specific things. That's what's happening. And instead of training and making sure we get the right police officers and train them and do all these other kinds of things, we put this little algorithm in place that we believe is going to, factor in those specific things. I just don't think that algorithm that method is perfect, right? I don't think it's perfect, like was said. And I think that now that that's happening, you allowing, the prosecutors is to me are too involved in the situation as well. I think that there needs to be oversight, that there needs to be people monitoring and watching what happens and making sure there's no patterns of individuals or this happening in specific precincts or specific people, that they're not detaining people for small and minor crimes simply because they can. Right? And I don't think that should happen. So that we need to monitor to that, but we do not need, because this is happening, to open up a floodgate where now people who've come in to the precinct now, who may have gotten caught this time for urinating on the street or for busting a window, but has a propensity of robberies on the street, right? Or doing property crime, and because we're not looking at them as a human being and another human being looking at these people holistically, we can't make a real determination of what kind of position we should put this person in, because there's an algorithm involved, and we're not taking into consideration, this guy today urinated, or this guy today did that, but 3 years ago, he took people's pocketbooks. 2 years ago, he did this. 1 year ago, he did that. He got caught in East Orange and Irvington and Patterson and this place. And I think we have to do that. I mean, if you don't do that, it's causing a problem for us in the police department. It's causing a problem, in administration.
To be fair to you, Mayor, this is exactly what happens in my office every day. Human eyes look at the individual and see the PSA. The PSA doesn't control what we do. It just doesn't. There's people, I'm going to be honest, there's people who are 6'6", red flags.
Why does that have to happen at the precinct and not after the
There's two different, well, to be fair to you, Mayor, what Lieutenant Lopez is referring to and concerned about is different than what I see and I'm concerned about. So just to be fair, I know that a lot of times people don't understand. There's a preliminary PSA that happened, and then there's a different one that occurs once the decision is made for that individual to be sent to the county correctional facility and reviewed. That PSA, the one that I see both, but the one that I deal with on a day-to-day basis is vetted by human beings. They make sure, pretrial services, a unit of the judiciary, make sure that a computer didn't make an error. It seems like that, and this is some of the misinformation that goes out, that you're going to be held because the computer said to be held. That's not true.
And Mr. Higgins, we're going to, in the interest of time, there's some other members in the audience that have a question. She's coming right behind you.
Yeah, how you doing?
Good.
My name Ibn Brooks. I'm with the Newark Community Street Team, part of the initiative for youth violence in the city of Newark. The thing that y'all speaking about, it reflected me and impacted my life real hardly years ago. I had like a couple of minor charges, and I was out of trouble for like 10 years. I'm walking down the street, go to the bar, go see my brother. Police whips up on me, detains me, go in the yard, find a gun and some drugs. And I went away for 10 years for that, just because of my record, not the simple fact that I've been out of trouble for 10 years and I was working and everything, but because I had a pride jacket, I went away for 10 years for that. So I missed out on my daughter growing up and everything.